Hi there. So, yesterday I posted a comment on LinkedIn yesterday morning around Bed Bath & Beyond and the fact that they have a new CFO. The post was something that I just felt really strongly about, and I didn't realize it would kind of have the reaction it did, to the point, in fact, where LinkedIn picked it up last night and featured it in their end-of-day news. So that was terrific. But what's more important is kind of the story here, I think. And I thought I'd dive in, just spend a little bit of time diving in and talking about sort of why I wrote it and sort of what struck me. The theme, first of all, was that you've got Laura Crossen, the new CFO, coming in at Bed Bath & Beyond. Now, on the one hand, that's so exciting. That's terrifically exciting because less than 5% of CEOs of publicly traded companies are female. That's like tiny. That's ridiculously small. It gets a little bit better in the CFO space, where around about 15% of S&P 500 and Fortune 500 companies are CFOs, but it's still 15%. That means 85% are men. So you've got a preponderance of men in these roles, and the fact that Laura comes into the new CFO role is exciting. I think it's terrific. And that's a huge accomplishment. But unfortunately, that accomplishment has been sort of surrounded by the circumstances in which she took the role. Her predecessor took his life. And there's lots of stories. And in fact, this was an interesting part of it. The comments on the post that I shared almost ignored Laura's appointment and focused, some of them did at least, focused entirely on what the former CFO had done and, whether the rumor and speculation of whether he was involved in some shady stock deals. I don't know anything about that. I mean, aside from what we've read in the news, and I don't speculate. But it's sad that celebration was overshadowed by ultimately that news. The second story then was interesting at how that evolved as well, and that was this notion of it being lonely at the top. Tim Cook in 2016, I think it was, actually talked about it's kind of a lonely job, and he's the CEO of, arguably a company that everybody's heard of. Apple have just taken market share, continue to take market share from Google in terms of the phone, the Android phones, OS, and it's just incredible that somebody at that sort of company, you kind of think, gosh, it's lonely. But those of us that are in this space know that is true. Over 50% of leaders have felt some sense of loneliness. And it's interesting that this loneliness is more about isolation, actually. It's not lonely in the sense that we don't have people around us. It's lonely in the sense that you feel perhaps isolated. There's a great quote Einstein wrote saying, it's a struggle to be so universally known and yet to be so lonely. And it's interesting. A leader comes into a role, a new division, a new operation, a new department even, and everyone knows who they are. But of course, they don't know who everyone else is. And what that attracts is this focus on the leader. There's an expectation, some call it admiration, some call it, well, prove yourself. But the expectation is that leader is going to make very few errors, that they have all the answers. And particularly as the company gets bigger, the stakes rise. The decisions get harder, the transformation opportunities become more significant, and there's more eyes and more focus on everything that's happening. It gets more complex. And we get it that the buck has to stop somewhere, but that doesn't remove this feeling of isolation that so many leaders have. That tended to hit quite a mark in terms of the commentary, and I see in all of the work that I do that some of the greatest conversations that I'm able to have with leaders who lead companies are those about sort of how they are feeling about the work that's going on around them, not the technical details. They know what a lot of those are, and as we all know, lots of leaders in organizations aren't involved in the nuts and bolts and the technical work at this point. They're involved in sort of steering the company and moving it forward. I will say when I was a leader of a company, I found it pretty hard, in fact, to make that transition initially. And what I found hard about it was the fact that my relationships changed. People viewed me differently, even though I didn't want to view them differently. I had to be careful about who I spent time with and who I didn't spend time with. Before, that didn't really matter. I could grab a sandwich or a coffee, or it didn't really matter. All of a sudden, I had to be careful about that because I was mindful that I didn't want people to think I was playing favorites. The stakes were higher. And when tough decisions needed to be made, everyone had an opinion. And at the end of the day, you need to own that opinion, which I was comfortable doing. And yet you also know that's probably going to isolate a number of people, or alienate a number of people. So what was just interesting is seeing the response to the story, and seeing the response to the fact that, it's lonely at the top, as one story. And the fact that Laura Crossen coming in at Bed Bath & Beyond, which is really a company that's going through quite a significant amount of turmoil right now, cost reductions, closing stores, laying off employees, and really trying to focus and double down on where they are as a company to get strong at their core. It's not an easy job. It's not an easy job to lead any transformation, but particularly not one from a position of weakness, which is where I'd argue Bed Bath & Beyond are right now. When you're trying to transform from a position of strength, it's a very different game. You can invest, you can start to take a couple moonshots, and you can figure out what that plan's going to be. But it's much harder when you're operating and coming at it from a position of weakness. So all told, the idea that isolation at the top is real, yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And I want to sort of implore us to consider the fact that leaders are humans first. And they take on the title, and that comes with perks, and it comes with salary, and we can get into that conversation later. Sometimes too much, sometimes in the wrong incentive structures. But nonetheless, they're humans first, and no one should ever be in a role or should feel that the role is getting to the point where, frankly, life is not worth living, which clearly was the case in the CFO at Bed Bath & Beyond's case. The second story. Great news for Laura Crossen. I really hope that we're able to see, frankly, you're getting to parity, getting to 50% at a minimum. We've talked about this for a long time. NASDAQ have come up with some interesting guidelines in terms of board representation from a DEI front. But really, just the fact that we've got a woman who's coming in to take the role at a very, very tough time of a big company is really exciting. I wish her all the very, very best. And I'm excited to see her story. So thanks for joining in. Excited to hear your comments. Let me know what you think.